and you serve the pig ear.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about working with that, because it seems like it can be just heavenly if you do it right.
Pig ears are my guilty pleasure. They're so good. They're crispy. They're crispy but yet chewy at the same time, and lots of flavor. And we actually have a regular that comes in, and he gets 4 orders for his entree. It's just a big bowl of pig ears, and he eats the whole thing every single time. But they're just they're just so good that they're like, I don't know, like crispy, savory gummy bears, if that makes sense.
The Touré show. Okay, though. The Touré show. Okay, though.
That might be the best question I've ever been asked.
You're a phenomenal person. I mean, you legendary.
I am a fan of you, my brother.
Black chefs are artists, scientists, magicians. They deliver amazing food while advancing the rich tradition of African American cuisine. I've been wanting to do a series of interviews with Black chefs on this show, and today we're launching into that.
Nina Compton is one of the great chefs in America. She runs Compère Lapin in New Orleans. She's won a James Beard Award. She got second place on Top Chef, but she's one of the great thinkers of what food is and can be, and one of the people who's helping take Black cuisine to another level at her restaurant, Compère Lapin. It was an honor to talk to Nina Compton about food. So let's get it. It's Nina Compton on Touré Show.
I think New Orleans is the best eating town in America, if not in the world. And
Yes.
Every time I go there, I have to tell you, po' boys and gumbo and jambalaya. I learned as a Northeasterner that jambalaya and gumbo are different. I didn't really know
very
that
different.
until I started going to New Orleans at the time. Hold on. And it's just an extraordinary eating culture. Talk a little bit about what makes New Orleans just such a great town to go out to eat in.
The first time I came here, I was blown away because it reminds me a lot of the Caribbean, but also a little bit of European. And the feel is nothing like any other city in this country. And it really stands out because it feels very tropical. It feels very warm. And the people are even warmer, and they're more friendly, and they're more fun, and they're more, boisterous and having a good time. But I think what really draws people to New Orleans is the music, is the food, is the culture. And, you talked about jambalaya and gumbo, and they're very respectful of their traditions. And when I moved here, I was scared to put gumbo in the menu because, it's such a sacred dish and it's so personal to so many people. And I wanted to make sure when I came here, I was very respectful on the tradition and not doing my research and just coming out and doing all these things. But I've never met a single person that I have met. When I tell them I live in New Orleans, they said, I can't wait to go back. I love New Orleans. And that says so much about this city, that people have just a good time.
It's more different than any other city. Like a lot of cities have their own vibe. New Orleans is like you've left America and you've gone into a separate country. Yes,
exactly. It is, it feels like the Caribbean. Like now we're heading into carnival season, and it's I tell people there's too many characters, not enough time, because everybody's dressed up no matter what day of the week it is. And it's just, you can just be yourself and nobody cares. You can just let all your worries go. So what do you love about cooking New Orleans food? I love the history of cooking New Orleans food. I think for me, it's just really about the history and understanding, how it came about. And, it's something that you talk about gumbo. I've never seen anybody do a deconstructed gumbo because people just don't do that. And it's because it is so sacred and it is so much history involved in that one dish. When you talk about gumbo, it was made out of necessity. And for me, it's really about understanding where food is right now and where it came from. So for me, it's really about going back in time and doing that history research on how it came here. How did the okra reach to America? It's because it came from Africa. Sweet potatoes, all of these things. It's just really a big history lesson in a bowl of gumbo.
Tell me about what it takes to be a great chef. What are the ingredients that go into that?
The ingredients going into being a good chef this comes with time. When I was a young chef, I wanted to make food complicated. I wanted to put 15 things in a dish when you just really need 4 or 5, and just make sure they're the best ingredients and make them shine and be harmonious. Being a good leader, being patient. And I think just really honing your skills each day. I think that's really the recipe for being a good chef.
Is the palate, because you have to have a great palate, right? You have to be able to taste in a really sophisticated way. Is that the element that is God-given, or can it be taught?
I think it can definitely be taught. I think people don't understand that when you're tasting something, what are you tasting for? Are you tasting for the balance of seasoning, the spice, the bitterness? It's just really about touching each part of that tongue and making those things sing is really about being a good chef.
What do you hate about being a chef?
It's a stressful job. It's a very stressful job. And sometimes I really feed on the stress and the exhilaration of a busy night. But it's a very stressful job. And I think that now, with people dining out more, what I don't like is when people think that they're a food critic and they can, make just awful comments on, social platforms about restaurants when, we're not perfect. We're trying our best every single day to make sure that you're having the best experience. But, sometimes we're not always on, and sometimes just a little mistake happens and people are really not forgiving.
So you wish people would not run to Twitter or Yelp every time something comes out not perfectly.
Immediately. And, we try to make sure that all our staff, if they do recognize that, they flag that and we try and recover that guest. And it's, I think people that choose to be in the restaurant industry, it's passion. They want to be there because they love taking care of people. They love feeding people. They love seeing that reaction when they have that first bite of, piping hot soup. And it reminds them of a memory that their mom made, when they were growing up as a child. That's what we do it for. We're not doing it because we're slouches. And I think when people are just not forgiving, and we're always open to criticism and critique, but we can do that at the table. When people run behind this computer screen and they immediately start typing away, I just think it's just a little bit cowardly.
So are you saying that they should be saying it to you or to the server?
Yeah, I think it's just criticism. So we know if somebody says, I really didn't enjoy the curry goat, when they're eating it, we say can we offer you something else? Immediately, so we can make sure that they have the full experience. And they say maybe it was my taste, but I thought that was a little too spicy. It's all about learning, and what I might think is the perfect dish might not be for everybody. And I can put my ego aside and make sure that they get a dish that makes them happy.
When folks come into your spaces, you have this name. So they are coming for you, for the Nina Compton experience.
Right.
So does that mean they're coming sort of knives out, like I want to take her down, or like she knows what she's talking about, so let me...
No, it's definitely not knives out. I think people are coming because they've read something about me, they've seen me on television, they've heard about the restaurant. New Orleans is also a city where people are sitting at a bar and they're here for a vacation, and they'll ask the bartender, "Hey, where should I go for brunch tomorrow? Where can I get the best po' boy?" So it's really about exchanging information and making sure that people, when they come here, they're having the best time in the city. So when people do come out, they are coming for the experience, not definitely to bring me down, but I just think that over the years, it's just become something that a lot of people just they take to, instead of having that one-on-one conversation with the people that actually run the restaurants. It's an honest critique, and we can take that very well. But I just feel like it can be done at the end of the night or during their meal.
I've worked in restaurants, never cooking, but I've seen the intensity of that the kitchen can have during dinner service, and
Right.
like when you get to like 8:30 or 9:30, when like the 8 o'clock people come in and like multiple tickets,
Yes.
like that's the pressure you're talking about. That like this is the moment I like, but I don't like at the same time, right? When
Right.
you have more dishes than you can even think about that you have to just knock off.
Right. It's a very stressful job. When you're telling the cook to go ahead and fire, 6 curry goat, 2 shallotelli, pork belly, or this or that, and he's trying to get everything rolling. And sometimes that is a room for error. If you're focused on one dish, you're focused on one. But when you're cooking multiple, that's a true gift to have, that you can make every single dish consistent.
That separates the professionals from people at home. Somebody might
Right. Yeah.
copy you, but do it night after night, make it taste the same, do 6 dishes at the same time, do it for 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah, it's during the pandemic, my husband and I were cooking almost every day, and it was fun for a while, but I'm like, I cook enough professionally. I don't need to cook 3 meals a day.
I'm a really bad cook at home. I have a couple dishes that I can crush.
Oh yeah, which ones?
Well, my kids love my pasta bolognese, right?
Oh,
Big
that's
Tony
nice.
bolognese, and I'll like cook it for like if they have friends coming over, and I'll make it for them. And like when the kids are not talking and they're just eating, and
Yeah.
you're like, yes, like. But then sometimes I'll like add different things. I'm trying to make it creamier or this or that. And the kids are like, you didn't make it exactly the same way as last time. I'm like, well, I'm trying. They're like the worst critics, right?
Yeah.
Like,
But they're honest critics, right?
they are. They're not going to eat it out of being polite.
Right.
What can the little home chef who's got to make a couple meals for their kids and their family, like what do you think are just an average they could do to be better?
I think just cooking simply. So sometimes when I don't want to have a very labor intensive meal, simple things like roasting a chicken. I roast a chicken. I put my Brussels sprouts, my carrots, my potatoes underneath the chicken, and I just throw it in the oven, and that becomes the meal. And then I strain off the drippings. I'll make a little bit of gravy, and maybe that would be my meal. I try and do kind of like one pot cooking, so it's not too crazy, because nobody likes a big pile of dishes at the
I
end of
just
their
have
meal.
no, of course not. Of course not. I never have faith in myself that the journey will end where I want it to end. Like I would follow all that, and I'd be
Right.
like, but is it going right? Have I gone too long? Have I not gone enough? Like,
It's definitely that's definitely one of the questions I think a lot of home cooks have. But I think also just having fun with it, and I like when I'm cooking at home. Whatever I'm cooking, if it's a roast chicken that becomes a chicken salad the next day, I try not to create too many dishes, because that fridge gets pretty full very quickly, and before you know it, it's just filled with leftovers, and you're throwing half of it away. So I don't like to waste. So I try and use that dish the next day some way so there's no leftovers, because I like to have my fridge clean and organized.
You feel pressure being part of the extraordinary lineage of Black chefs in this country and what Black people have meant to American culinary history, and you stand on top of that, right? You're one of the people bringing that whole legacy and tradition forward. Um, is that something that you think about as you do your work?
I definitely do. It is a lot of pressure because there aren't that many Black chefs that are recognized. It's a very small group, and it's really sad because there are so many of us, but a lot of us are not recognized, especially at that top level, because there are some people doing some really special things, and it's shocking. And this is not only in America. This is also in the Caribbean as well, because when people talk about the great restaurants in New Orleans, they used to be headed by Black chefs, and a lot of them are not. And you see the same thing in the Caribbean as well. A lot of these head positions are held by expats from, the UK or from the States or, from Europe. So you see a lot of those things that you just don't see those familiar faces of people that look like us. So I think now in the past decade, I would say that you see more Black chefs getting recognized and, doing their food and being proud of it. I think that Black chefs now have a confidence that they didn't have, because if you look at when I was coming up 20 years ago, nobody was talking about Senegalese food or Nigerian food or Caribbean food or even Southern food. It wasn't recognized. It was more classical French, Italian. Those were the highest, ranking cuisines. And now you see, take for example, in New Orleans, we have Serene, who's from Senegal, who's cooking a tasting menu of Senegalese food. You'd never see this at that level. So now you find a lot of Black chefs having the confidence because the doors are wide open. And you see chefs like J.J. Johnson cooking amazing food. You have Mashama Bailey. So there's so many chefs that are just they're just doing what they do and what they love, and they're not being apologetic about it.
Who else is at that level for you who's doing special things that are unapologetically Black?
I mean, there's so many. Mashama, you have Eduardo Jordan, you have J.J. Johnson, you have Andre Foles. That's Jamaican, but just doing really amazing food in New York. You have Kwame, who is opened up multiple outlets. He's actually doing a Black Food and Wine Festival that happens in Virginia, which is something you never saw before. And you have so many people. You have Naisha Arrington that's cooking amazing food. So we are out there, and we are, bonding together and doing our own thing. So when you see a, food and wine festival it's focused on, Black chefs, that's amazing. And that's to show that we're making the steps.
Yeah. So are you saying that racism is part of why a lot of more Black chefs aren't getting recognized?
I think it is. And I think that, when George Floyd, when that happened in 2020, there was a huge shift in the industry, because people started to recognize, people started to look within and say, hey, my group of employees were not diverse. I need to also invest in outreach programs, to help uplift people in the community and do all these things. So there was definitely a shift in 2020 where people said, hey, something's not right here and we need to make the change. So organization like James Beard has definitely made the shift where we're seeing more people being recognized. And I think now that, unfortunately, with what happened with George Floyd, it was very unfortunate somebody had to die and be, such a powerful moment in many people's lives for this shift to happen, but it happened.
Are you saying that investors don't want to take a chance on a black chef, that big chefs aren't helping black chefs rise up the ranks enough? That are you saying that that
No,
white diners are less likely to go where we are?
no, I don't think it's that. I think that it was not a recognized cuisine. When people said, I'm going to go to a Senegalese
African
restaurant, I think there was just lack of education, because all that we have been like brainwashed to know is good food is French or Italian. Nobody recognized, Mexican cuisine or Chinese cuisine as being, haute cuisine. And you have more restaurants doing things like that. So for a while, if you weren't cooking French fine dining, you were nothing, pretty much. And I think that we are recognizing that, hey, my food matters, my cuisine, it counts, And I think that more chefs are taking more pride in what they've grown to, they've grown up with. And I think that it's just really, we have just been, again, we've been told that French cuisine and all of those cuisines are the pinnacle of, fine dining and good food. And also a lot of, sorry, let's finish my last thought.
No, please.
So a lot of these black chefs that have come up, Eduardo Jordan, Kwame, myself, as we're coming up the ranks, we just thought the right path was to work in these fine dining Michelin-starred restaurants, because that just seemed like the right path. We didn't have Senegalese restaurants. We didn't have, fine dining Caribbean restaurants. We didn't have, fine dining Southern restaurants. We didn't have restaurants like the Gray that Mashama's doing fine dining. We didn't have those institutions that we have now. So I think that the path that the young cooks can take is, if they're Black and they want to learn how to cook Black food, Black cuisine, Southern cuisines, ethnic food, they can go work at the Gray. They can go work at June Baby. They can go work at Compère Lapin and understand their roots. Whereas before, we didn't have that opportunity.
Well, are you saying that for someone to get to your level, you have to be able to do French fine dining to show the industry, I'm a elite level chef? But that's not the best. You're saying that's not really the best exhibit of your skill.
Well, that was the old path, because we didn't have restaurants like the Gray. We didn't have restaurants like Tatiana that Kwame is cooking. We didn't have restaurants like those, and now we do. So if you want to learn techniques within the cuisine that you grew up with, if you were Senegalese and you want to learn Senegalese fine dining, you go work at the Carnola. You don't need to go to those Michelin French fine dining, because you can do it. You can just miss that step and go work in the core of that.
But that was okay. That's interesting. You learned a lot from Daniel Bullard, who's a major chef. What'd you learn from him?
That was a restaurant that was the most consistent. I never saw a plate come back and a guest said they didn't like it. It was very high pressured, because perfection was everything, and that was passed down from him through every single person who worked in that restaurant, that it had to be perfect every single time. So it was immense pressure, and I appreciated that. And I took away a lot of things in terms of organization, just everything that on a higher level, I took some of that and interpreted some of that into my restaurants right now. So, having pride in what you're cooking, being more thoughtful about what you do during the day, how you affect, the people that you are around, it was a big thing as well.
So the drive for perfection that he taught you how to set that standard sky high and how to consistently meet it.
Yes.
Wow. So and I've never met him, but I imagine he's not a screamer.
He can be. He can be. And I think a lot of people don't understand that, you know, chefs don't wake up in the morning and say, today I'm going to yell and scream and I'm going to do all these things. But, people, it's again, you're in a pressure cooker all day long. From the second that you walk in, as an owner, you walk in the door, you tell everybody good morning, and I go, chef, by the way, the RoboCoop is broken, or the delivery didn't come in, or the fish, the quality was poor, or somebody called out, and all you're doing is just troubleshooting the entire day, and then you have to run a busy service. And it's sometimes it happens. But I don't think chefs wake up in the morning and say, what, I'm going to yell and scream and smash a plate. That's the last thing that we want to do. But I mean, there are some days where everybody has a breaking point.
No, absolutely. You are under tremendous pressure. And as you're saying, you're just fending off problem after problem all day long. And you're really hearing mostly about complaints about
Yeah.
the batch that was bad. Nobody's going to come talk to you
Right.
the meat that's great. The person who's out, the people who are happy, like walk away quietly. The people
Right.
who are upset about something, they make a big fuss. But what culture do you try to create in the kitchen? Are you finding yourself, sometimes I yell at people because I've reached my breaking point, or you like really try to like keep the temperature down even while the standards are high?
I think that I am very quiet in the kitchen. We play music during prep, and I like to stay laser focused on my task. So I find that if I am talking, I get distracted because I want to make sure that I'm doing things right and efficiently, because I have a lot of things. I'm not a chef that sits at a desk and answers emails all day. I am in the kitchen. I am with my staff, but I also have a lot of things I have to do. So for me, being in the kitchen, I'm pretty much laser focused. But I like to create an environment where I come into the kitchen during prep time, I'm like, where's the music? Because I think for me, music in the kitchen it's really important. It's really important for my day, and it sets the tone and it sets the energy. So sometimes we'll put on, Billie Holiday if it's a Sunday and it's rainy and it's moody, or we have like reggae Sundays, so we'll put reggae on, and it just makes people feel like they want to come to work. And it is setting the tone in the beginning of the shift, having a very relaxed, but we're here to work as well. But when it comes to the actual service at night, by 5:30, I want the kitchen, clean and buttoned up, and everybody's focused. And it's, we all high five at the end of the shift, and we say it was a great day, or we need to work on these things. But I've had those days where I get really upset, and it's with reason. It's because I'm really upset, and my staff know that I don't really yell and scream. But when I do, that means we really messed up. So it's, and it's an outburst for, a quick second. But then I always have, at the end of the night, I pull that cook or that staff member on the side and I said, hey, I was really upset because of XYZ. And I explained my reasoning after that. And, it's not because I'm trying to attack them. Sometimes I just expect the highest of my staff, and I have to communicate those things. So at the end of the night, we both leave with an understanding of the expectation and why things happen. And then the next day is a new day.
Well, why did you name it Compère Lapin?
So
Brother Rabbit, right?
yes, yes, yes. So when we were moving to New Orleans, we didn't have a name. And because of the Creole culture and the similarities between St. Lucia, the island I'm from, and Louisiana, I made a list of Creole names, and I had typed in Compère Lapin, Louisiana, and the same book that I grew up with, Compère Lapin, the same imagery, everything was the same book I grew up with. And that was something that we read as a child in school. You had Anansi, which was the spider. You had exactly, you know what I'm talking about. But when I saw that book, I said, that's going to be the name of the restaurant. My husband's like, oh, you're crazy. He's like, people are going to butcher the name and all of these things. And I'm like, no,
Okay.
I'm like, they do. But it was me bridging the gap between the Caribbean and New Orleans. So it just felt very right to me for that to be the name.
Bridging the gap. It's interesting. You said we believe in the complexity of simplicity. And that goes back to what you were saying before about you don't need to put a ton of things on the plate. For perfectly chosen things can be better.
Yes. It's really about, having that harmonious moment where everything is, there's a phrase we use in the Caribbean. It says, too many cooks spoil the broth, meaning if you put too much in there, it just makes a mess. Sometimes you just need a little bit, just 3 or 4 things, and they're the best things, and then it's great. And I think that's where the complexity comes in, is having the best of the best, on that dish, and just making it really shine.
Are there certain things that you like to cook more?
It depends. Sometimes I just came back from St. Lucia earlier this month, and I get really energized of, finding things that I grew up with and bringing that to the restaurant. So right now we have a wild boar pepper pot. It's a dish that is Guyanese, but we had a lot of Guyanese teachers when we were in school, and they would talk about their cuisines, and that was one of the dishes that really stood out to me. So every time I go home, I kind of like, find a dish that you don't really normally see. And I want people to enjoy that. It's like taking them on a trip to the Caribbean, but in my restaurant.
One of the meals that I'll never forget, many years ago, my friend got married, and his bachelor party was at some restaurant in Williamsburg in Brooklyn, where if you ordered ahead, they make the whole pig head.
Oh, nice.
And I ate a couple of bites of the ear, and it was amazing, and it was unlike anything that I ever had. And you serve the pig ear.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about working with that, because it seems like it can be just heavenly if you do it right.
Pig ears are my guilty pleasure. They're so good. They're crispy. They're crispy but yet chewy at the same time, and lots of flavor. And we actually have a regular that comes in, and he gets 4 orders for his entree. It's just a big bowl of pig ears, and he eats the whole thing every single time. But they're just they're just so good that they're like, I don't know, like crispy, savory gummy bears, if that makes sense.
I mean, it's just extraordinary. So wait,
Yes.
on your menu, there's a 4% kitchen recognition charge.
Yes.
What does that mean? We're so good that you should make sure that you take care of us?
No, it's not that. It's a way my husband and I, we were talking about how to create, to raise wages, because during the pandemic, it was really, really hard on a lot of restaurants, and, raising wages to, $24, it was just not economical for us. And we researched a way, because in some restaurants in Europe, there is no tipping. It's all built in with gratuity and everything else. But here in the States, if a tip has to go to the kitchen, it cannot be a tip. It has to be a service charge. So we incorporated that way.
For the rules of New Orleans.
No, of the States.
of the of America, right? Okay.
Exactly. So if you tip somebody, it has to be the person that is actually serving you. It cannot
Right.
go to the kitchen. So if you have a server, say for example, Jessica, she's your server, and you write a tip for, I don't know, $20 on the end of the check, that tip goes to Jessica. So the only way that
Or
we
they
could
can
get
pool, or they can pool the tips, but they have to be pooled among the servers and the
exactly
bar staff. They cannot be shared by
with the
people who are
kitchen.
not doing service.
Exactly.
What do you think? The tipping, the whole tipping system seems like potentially a way to pass some of the restaurant's costs on to the diners. Is that not
Right. Well,
what's going on?
it still is ends up on the guest anyway, regardless. Because even if I say, "Hey, I'm going to raise my," because this is the thing about Touré, is that when people come to a restaurant, they see that I'm going to charge $60 for a curry goat. They're not going to come to the restaurant because they see it's $60. And there's a huge dispute that's happening where people are saying, if you want to raise price, if you want to pay your staff more, just raise your prices. But they see it's kind of it's a mind thing. When people see the prices on a menu and they see it's $78 or $60, like, wow, it's so expensive. But it's just really, people just don't understand the dynamics of how a restaurant runs. And I know that Danny Meyer had tried for a very long time to eradicate tipping, because tipping is, we had talked about it with a lot of restaurateurs here in New Orleans during the pandemic of how do we get rid of tipping? And what if we just do where it's just all built in? And one of the people brought up that said, well, not every restaurant can do that, because if you have, a fast casual and they're still getting tips, they can't build it in, because perception wise, I'm paying $8 or $9 for a po' boy, and then now it's 18 because you're building everything in. It's not, because it's not perceived as affordable or fast casual, right? Because that's what it breaks down to. It's some concepts, it just doesn't translate.
But you and I'm just playing devil's advocate here.
Yeah.
I worked in restaurants. I will always give 20% without question. But you and I have eaten in Europe.
Right.
The prices are not insane, right? There's restaurants of all different, and I just happened to be talking about this with my son yesterday, because we went somewhere where we went to a restaurant that sometimes we sit in, but this time we took out, and he was like, "Why did you tip them 15%? They didn't do anything." And I'm like, basically, I would feel guilty if I didn't.
Right.
And he's like, "Well," he's 15, so then he goes into so if you buy something that's $10 and they bring it to you, you give them $2. If you buy something that's $50 and they bring it to you, they did the same thing. It cost the waiter the same thing to bring you a steak or to bring you French fries. But
Right.
but then you paid him 5 times what you paid her to bring you just a plate of French fries. And he's like, "How does that make sense?" And I'm like, I don't know.
Right.
I paid an entirely different amount for the same action from the server.
Right.
I don't know what the difference is. The difference is socially constructed. So what? But your whole business is predicated on that, and you have a server going out trying to get me to buy more and more and more. So I'll give her more. So how do you defend that?
But I think, in all honesty, is that tipping, it's hard, because we have tried so many different ways. But in this country, because if I go to London and I leave a tip, it's just like they're like surprised. And when the
They'll
Europeans
give it back to you. They chased me down the street in England. They're like, "This is yours."
Right. So when the Europeans come over here, they're always considered terrible tippers, because culturally, it's not in their culture. If it's 15 euro, it's 15 euro, and if I give a 20, I get my change back. It's just not. It's not culturally. It's just not what they do. But in America, we have been culturally, that's what we expect, is that if I ring in a coffee, I expect $1 tip. We expect it. And I think that we need to find a way to eradicate that and just build everything in. But we have tried to find creative ways to just get rid of it. But I just think some people want to go back to tipping. And that's what happened with Danny Meyer. When he tried that, there was a lot of pushback because people were like, the server's like, I want to get my tips. And the guest is like, well, I want to leave a tip. So it's just, I don't think we can ever go back to getting rid of tips because culturally it's what we expect. But I don't think I'm not a fan of it. It's a very gray area, and there's so many things that have been documented where it is unfair the way that the system is built on tips. Because that server is expecting that tip, to pay their bills or do this. It's like they thrive on tips, which is not the best way to live because there's no other industry that does that.
Well, I have one employer. We decided on my compensation, and that's what I get. If I had to depend on every single person I encounter to determine how much I'm going to get, that would be very chaotic. And,
right.
You may be a very nice person, but you just left me $1 short on your math or whatever. Like, the kitchen.
It is a tricky thing because, like you said, you're expecting that tip. When I went to culinary school, we had a class that you're training in the front of the house, and I remember this was my first serving thing. I was maybe 19 or 20, and the restaurant is open to the public. So we had the young couple that came in, and we were having a great time. We were cracking jokes. We were talking about everything. They really enjoyed the food. And they said, okay, we're done for the evening. So I go ring up that check and I come out and they're gone. They completely ghosted me. And I tell my instructor, I'm like, hey, these people on table 21, they left. They just left. And, it's just, here I am expecting, I'm like, these people are going to leave me the biggest tip because we're friends, we're having a great time. And it's, it's sad because it is transactional, and you do form a bond with that person for a short period of time. And there is a development of trust. And then, you're left with your hands empty.
I ask you this because every couple of years, just for fun, I go on Twitter and I say, guys, you got to tip 20% no matter what. And, most of my followers are Black. And inevitably, there's like a 2 to 3 day argument about with some people saying, no, you don't have to. What if the servers are bad? What if this? What if that? Blah, 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 blah. And do you? So I know that there is some within our community. There is some resistance to tipping.
Yes.
In your experience as a restaurateur, are Black people worse tippers than other races?
I don't think so. I think that is a stereotype because there are some people that, it's, I don't know, there's some people that dine out and, if the server forgets, if their glass of wine takes a minute too long, they're taking half of that tip off. They're keeping tally. So I don't think it's about
That's no
race.
way to eat. That's no way to eat, to be like judging the server as like just relax, enjoy yourself.
Exactly. But there's some people that's the way that they think, and it's very unfortunate. But I don't think it's a race thing. I just think there's just some people that, again, there's some people that don't dine out a lot, so their expectation is higher because they don't dine out a lot. There's some people that they've saved up a lot of money to come out because, they just got paid and they want to treat themselves. So their expectation is higher because this is the big deal for them to come out to eat. So it all varies there's just so many different variables. It could be um, they're having a fight at the table. That happens. Husband and wife get into an argument, and then she wants to leave and he wants to stay, and then the mood sours, and then they're not focusing on the tip. They're focusing on what's happening between them. So there's a lot of different things that happen in restaurants, different dynamics that affect the tip.
I mean, there's this when the one thing that people keep saying to me when I say you got to tip 20% is they're basically like, what if I get bad service?
Right.
And I'm like, look, in 25 years of going to restaurants, I struggle to recall times when I got bad service, right?
Right.
Like 99% of the time or more, the servers are on top of it. They're doing their thing. They understand the tip is everything. And I
Right.
chose to do the job. They may or may not love it, but they chose to do it, and they're showing up, going as hard as they can. I'm really struggle to think about times I went to restaurants and was like, the server ruined it for me. Right.
Right.
I even remember
Right.
once we went to dinner in New Mexico at this nice place with my wife and my kids, and the server came over and she exhaled and she looked like she was about to burst into tears. And
Oh no.
she ran off. She said, she may or may not have said, excuse me, but she ran off. We were like, that was weird. And then, like, a couple minutes later, she came back, like, brand new, didn't excuse or anything. Just like, I'm Jessica, like, I'll take care of you. Like, what, let's get caught, whatever, and it was
Right.
like, you took the time to, like, compose yourself. You didn't, and then I just, I know these people work hard. This myth of, like, what if I get bad service? I think if you don't feel like you were getting good service, you should either speak to the server or the manager and
Right.
say, we didn't appreciate this or this. But
Right.
you shouldn't be docking somebody's tip for these sort of things.
I agree because, again, there's some people that come into restaurants and they will eat half of a dish, and the server will say, hey, do you not enjoy the dish? And that's them just trying to recover the guests and make sure that they are getting the full experience. And then they'll go online and say, oh, I had this dish and it was terrible, but they didn't tell the server, they didn't tell a manager. And I think if you do that at the moment in the restaurant and you say, hey, I'm not enjoying this drink, or the server's terrible, what will we do? Then we give you a different server so you can have a better experience. There's ways to fix it. But if you don't say anything, we can never improve or be aware of what's going on.
You keep talking about recover. Are you saying that you're really actively trying to make sure that people come at least twice to your restaurant, right?
We wanna make sure that people, if they're expressing dissatisfaction at that moment, we're trying our best at that moment to make sure we get them back on track. And we've turned a lot of guests around where we can read their energy, where they look a little uncomfortable, they look a little upset, or they might make a small comment. So we try and win them back before they leave that night. And sometimes you can't always win everybody back, but we can at least try, because I think if some people are having a terrible time in a restaurant and they're not being listened to or paid attention, they're even more upset. But all we can do is at least try. And if we don't win them back, at least we tried. Because I think being dismissive is the worst thing that you can do.
Are you making a lot of money running this restaurant?
People think you're making a lot of money, and I look at the sales and I look at everything, the breakdown. It's a lot of work. It is a lot of work. It is a lot of stress. And like, for the example, the curried goat, the process for the two main ingredients, the sweet potato gnocchi and the actual goat, to braise the goat, to cook the goat from start to finish, is 3 to 3.5 days. To make the gnocchi is almost 2 days start to finish. And I don't think people understand, I guess it's a labor of love. And when I do the breakdown of the amount of hours I put in, it's not a lot of money. I think people think that restaurants, because we're busy and we're packed every night, that we're making a lot of money. Sometimes we're not, because we're not big chain restaurants, we're independent restaurants. And, it's a lot.
You
Running a,
you have two, right?
I have two, but they're not big restaurants,
How many
you
how
know?
many how many how many seats and do you have?
So both restaurants are 70 seats. So, depending on the night, ideally, if I can get, two or three turns, it's really about turning, getting as
Yeah.
many people in. We're not a tasting menu where we can charge $3.25 a head and then people can linger for 3 hours and have a table for the night. It's just really about volume. We're not 200 seats. We're not a Morton Steakhouse. That's a huge restaurant. Um, and then also there's a lot of things have gone up in the past 3-4 years. Labor
But if you
costs is, go
but if
ahead.
you turn if you turn twice, you turn the table twice, right?
Hmm.
Which is reasonable, right?
Yes,
Right? To get three parties at one table in a night. So
right.
you're talking about you're serving over 400 people between the two places every night.
Ideally, that's if every night is hits the mark, and sometimes it doesn't. And I think when people, you have to be consistently busy, and there are some months, especially in the summertime, when there's 3 months when there's no tourists, there's no conventions, and it's things even out where we're not losing money, but we're not rolling in a ton of cash, because there are some months where it is very slow. And
Are you booked for tonight?
tonight's one of the restaurants is closed. We close Monday, Tuesday. And the other restaurant, it's pretty quiet,
Okay.
but the weekend it ramps up because it is Mardi Gras this weekend. So it is. But, it really, things do even out. But, on the slower months, you got to make sure you're not, you know, losing money, but the busy months compensate for that. So it evens out. But it is, a lot of people um, fail at restaurants because they mismanage the money. They're not focusing on, they're not looking at the invoices, how much food costs. They're not looking at, are the cooks staying an extra 3 hours past their, end of the shift. So it's just really about, you know, looking at all your things and making sure they line up.
Yeah, I know in New York, to last 3 years seems to be the point, the breaking
Yeah.
point. That most restaurants don't last 3 years, and if you do,
Oh,
then you can last 10 or 15.
well, I mean, I think a lot of restaurants, when people open restaurants, it's because they want to. And I think for some people that go into it, it's also an ego thing too. There's a lot of people that hold on way past the prime. They're holding on. I have friends that say, my restaurant is really struggling, like we're in the red every month. And I'm like, just close the restaurant. They're like, oh, we can't. And I said, cut the bleed, and there's just some people that, they're just holding on because it's an ego thing. Nobody wants to see their restaurant fail, their business fail, and they hold on to it longer than they really should. And they're just digging themselves into debt. And I know that landlords are ruthless with not giving any rent breaks. I know in the pandemic, especially in New York, people were still charging full price for rent when there was nobody in Manhattan.
Mm. But are you guys in the black for the year?
In the black. Yeah, we are. Thankfully.
Well, of course, thankfully. Of course,
Thankfully.
thankfully.
Thankfully. But but don't get me wrong. I mean, it's not all, it's not all glorious, because there are some months. I mean, January was terrible for us. The beginning of January, right after New Year's, the first 2 weeks was empty. I mean, it was and my husband's like, Nina, don't worry. It happens every time after New Year's. It's quiet for the first 2 weeks. But when you see those numbers really dwindle after having, a great Christmas and New Year's Eve, and then it's crickets, it is stressful because you're like, how are we going to make payroll? How are we going to do this? How do we order food? How do we schedule? It is very stressful in those moments because when it's busy, things fall into place. And I tell people busy fixes everything. When it's slow, it's a big chess game.
But you have to spend a lot of money in anticipation of getting it back. So there is a float period when you've purchased the food and you start to pay the staff and what have you. And then later the guests come in and pay for
Right.
it, right? So there's a middle period where you're like, okay, I've paid, right? I've paid it
Right.
all
Well,
out. Now bring it back.
there's a lot of that. And also what people don't understand, just to build a restaurant, it's not cheap,
Right.
because you have to get the hoods. The hoods are very expensive, the equipment, everything else. So going into it, you're putting a lot of money up front.
Yeah, that's what makes it hard to get to 3 years, right? That there's all
Yes.
the beginning costs that have to be laid out with when nobody's going to be sitting in here for 3 to 6 months, but we still got to
Right.
buy all this stuff to be able to take care of them when they finally get here.
Right.
If you can get through that, then in your fourth year we don't have the overhead, so now we can start to ascend maybe.
Right. And that's
But
what it is, because you are really hoping and praying that opening night for the next 3 months you're jammed. That's the hope.
But you're not just competing with yourself, you're competing with every other restaurant in town.
Yes.
Tourist options, DoorDash is now
Yes.
you're competing with DoorDash.
Well, and now there are more and more restaurants opening up because everybody
Right.
wants to open a restaurant. There's so many people that, when you think about all these chefs that work in these restaurants for other chefs, they move on, and always the goal is when they leave that restaurant, they want to open something of their own. So now you're
Yeah.
competing with somebody that worked with you, 5 years ago. They're opening their own restaurant. So we're just seeing so many restaurants just pop up, and it's huge competition. And that's why you have to be on your game all the time, because it just takes one bad experience where people are like, I'm not going to go back there. Because I have other options. And, dining out now, you want to have that stellar experience every single time. There's no room for bad nights.
If I lived in New Orleans, could I DoorDash a plate from you?
I don't think we do. We did do DoorDash during the pandemic, but we
Okay.
deactivated that so we could just focus on in dining guests.
Why?
Because it's I think that our food is better received when people are actually sitting in the restaurant and enjoying it and getting the full experience. When you open up a box, it's just not optimal.
No, the part of why I love you're saying part of why I love your food is because I'm in your space, so I'm getting your aesthetics, I'm getting your timing, right? I'm getting the full the lighting, the whole thing, rather than I'm at home, I'm out of the experience, and I'm
Right.
just you don't want that.
No, I don't. I want people to get all those flavors at the right time, and sometimes reheating is not the best option.
Yeah. Yeah, no, the timing makes a huge difference because you finish it and then I'm getting it 10, 12 minutes later, maybe 15
Right.
minutes later. That can't be optimal.
Right.
Not for
Right.
something high. Do you think about you ever stop to think about Top Chef changed my life? A reality show changed my life.
Yeah. It's funny. When I got the phone call, I told my mom, I said, "Hey, mom, this show contacted me. They want me to, be a contestant." And she's like, "Don't do it." She's like, "I'm not going to watch it. It's going to be too stressful." And I said, "Okay." And then as time went on, it kept on calling me. And I said, Mom, I think I'm going to do it. And she's like, why? And I'm like, because I think I can really put Caribbean food on the map. I can let people know about where I'm from, what I'm cooking, not just being a chef, but really letting people know that I am from a tiny, tiny island and we make amazing food. And I wanted to know that. And when I did that show, it was very hard. It's probably the hardest thing I've ever done. And, when I had people that I worked with that did TV shows, they said, oh, your life is going to change after the show airs. And I'm like, okay. And once the finale aired, 3-4 months go by and no phone calls, no emails. So I said, well, maybe I was just a dud. And then I would say by the 5th or 6th month, everybody started calling. Can you do this? Can you fly to Toronto to cook? Can you do this? And it just took off. And I don't think people are prepared for the chaos that happens. And I was getting burnt out because I was still working my current job and traveling and doing all these things. And it just became not fun. And I told my husband, I said, if we're going to figure out the next step for us, I need to take a break. I need to quit my job and just see how the chips stack. And then we go from there. But I just could not balance the two of working a really busy job and then travel on top of it. And it just became a lot. But you have opportunities thrown at you. People were saying, open a restaurant in Chicago, LA, New York, Atlanta. And I'm just like, this is too much. This is a life-changing experience. And I want to make sure that I'm doing the right thing for me.
Thank you so much for a great interview, and thanks to you for listening. Toure Show gives you fuel to power your dreams because you can use your dreams like a rocket ship to blast you into a life you never imagined. You can make your dreams a reality. Maybe this show can help. You can find me on Twitter at Toure and on Instagram at Toure Show. Toure Show is written by me, Toure, and produced by Jennifer Brown. Our editor is Ryan Woodhall. Our booker is Claudia Jean, and we're distributed by DCP Entertainment. And we will be back next Wednesday with more amazing guests because the man can't shut us down.